you want your check?
I'm going to keep it a beanbag with you. Within the first 15 minutes of Straw, Tyler Perry rains down more calamities than any Netflix thriller. I mean, we're talking eviction, CPS, getting fired, and a science project that looks like a homemade pipe bomb. And all of that's before the bank heist. Lemony Snicket can't hold a candle to this series of unfortunate events, because I'm telling you, Straw is probably the one film on Netflix with the most unfortunate events. Then you add in some controversy and social commentary, ramen noodles, a little bit of hidden symbolism, and that's how you get Real Enigmas and Theories to cover this type of movie. It was good to see Sinbad and Glenn Turman on the screen together again. They both played on a different world together, so that was pretty cool. And to see Taraji P. Henson playing a young single mother at age 54 is definitely worthy of some flowers. What a dope career she's had. Tyler Perry sparking up controversy yet again with another installment to his lengthy filmography. And we're going to go over all of that after we do a dope recap. But before we do that, I want to say thank you to everyone for watching. And if you're new to Real Enigmas and Theories, welcome. This is about to be a spoiler-heavy video, so in case you're trying to avoid that, you've been warned. So without further ado, let's cook. Before we get into the recap, I know it's kind of funny, but I have to point out the possibility of this being a multiverse hustle and flow branch of Suge's life after DJ was in prison. There are a lot of similarities between the two movies aside from the Taraji Suge paradigm. The hustle and flow verse is kind of crazy when you think about it. But let's get back to the recap. Let's cook. And speaking of let's cook, the movie starts off with Let Her Cook by Glorilla blasting through the apartment wall into the apartment of Janiyah and Aria. Oh snap, while I'm editing this, I just now realized that Glorilla is a Memphis artist and Hustle and Flow takes place in Memphis. Don't worry, I'm not going to keep throwing the Hustle and Flow verse at you. So Janiyah is a hardworking single mother whose entire world revolves around keeping her young daughter Aria alive and safe. They live in a small apartment complex where mounting unpaid rent, medical bills, and everyday expenses loom over every moment. From the opening scene, the kitchen sink and the counters show how overwhelming the chore of raising an ill child and working 2 jobs could be. And I'm sure that the conditions of the apartment didn't help Aria's condition. On the fridge, we can see one of Aria's pieces of artwork, a crayon drawing of some animals in a zoo, which looks more like a jail to me. And then we see some ramen noodles with unpaid bills on the table. And we're going to talk about the zoo picture and the ramen noodles later, because believe it or not, there's some heavy symbolism in there. Janiyah fusses over Aria's bath and braces her daughter against slipping while Aria tells her mother that the teacher publicly announced her family's inability to afford the lunch program in front of the whole entire class. In this scene, we also learn that Aria has a love for engineering and building things, and she's proud of her battery-operated science project that literally looks like a homemade pipe bomb. And her mom moves it away from the water to keep it safe for the science fair. I want to take this time to point out that Janiyah traces back to the Hebrew ending Yah or Aya, which is a shortened form of Yahweh, the personal name of God in Hebrew scripture. When that element is added to a stem related to John, Jane, or Jan, the composite literally means Yahweh is gracious or God has answered. In other words, Janiyah is a modern elaboration of the same Hebrew roots that give us John, Jane, Jahane, and dozens of biblical names ending in Aya. From Hebrew, Aria or Araya carries the meaning lion or lioness. It's directly related to the shorter name Ari or lion, and is also found in Neo-Aramaic dialects with the same sense. Some sources would even note that an alternate Hebrew meaning could be fig picker, fig as in the fruit. I find this very interesting, being that Aria is a builder and Genesis depicts Adam and Eve stitching fig leaves as aprons after gaining the knowledge of good and evil. While they weren't building with stone, this act of creating garments cast the fig leaves as one of humanity's first workshop tools linking the fig to the emergence of self-awareness. And in many ways, that's what this story is about, but we'll get to that later. As they leave for school and work, she passes by Sinbad's character and gives him some pocket change while the landlord screams from the balcony, demanding rent by 10 a.m. or eviction follows. While dropping Arya off at school, the principal seems to eye them with a funky veiled judgment. Arya goes into the school and Janiyah rushes to her job at the grocery store, only to endure hostility from customers and disdain from her ridiculous boss Richard, played by Glenn Turman. I had to stop and pause this movie so many times and laugh. I'm thinking the whole time, this can't be the brother from Cooley High. Next, a customer with a man and a child try to pass off ineligible food items to be purchased with a WIC card. And I just had to pause and laugh again and laugh at how she passed the card to her with her pinky up, only to get rejected. And I had to respect the attention to detail with the kid having what looks like to be freeze pop juice with the accurate amount of stickiness on the young boy. He looked like he was playing out in the yard eating a freeze pop, and his mom just picked him up and said, "Come on, we going to the grocery store."
Bitch, I do this all the time.
And I don't know if that was bro's dad or what, but he just takes a bottle and smashes it at Janiyah's feet. And it's an absolute miracle that she didn't cut them ankles. And she definitely hit the Space Ghost on him when that glass broke. So she goes to get a bucket and clean the mess up when her daughter's school calls and she has to ask Richard for her check and leave. But he gives her 30 minutes to get back with no check.
30 damn minutes!
And that 30 minutes ends up being 2 hours. And during those 2 hours, she finds out that her bank account is in jeopardy because she doesn't have the minimum balance required. Her child is taken away from her by CPS. And then she gets her car rammed by an asshole off-duty cop who ends up getting her car impounded and ticketed for expired registration. Then she has to walk back to work in the rain. She gets back to work soaking wet, only for Richard to fire her and not give her her check that's right across the room.
Your ass is fired. Oh, you want your check?
All of this happened and we're not even 15 minutes in yet. Janiyah walks home to find all of her things have been thrown out by the landlord, and I mean everything, including her daughter's science project that conveniently looks like a bomb, and her medicine. And just when you thought this couldn't get any more ridiculous, the movie tells you to think again. Janiyah grabs a book bag out of the pile of belongings, her daughter's medication, and the science project, and heads back to her job to plead with Richard to give her the paycheck that's sitting right there on his desk instead of sending it in the mail. And just as that happens, a man comes in, reads her name tag, and then sticks up Richard and Janiyah at gunpoint before pistol whipping Janiyah, and then she pulls out an ill Black Widow disarming maneuver, takes the gun, and pops the robber at point-blank range. Then Richard the Ridiculous thinks Janiyah is in on the robbery for some reason, just because the dude read her name tag. But why would she kill him if she was in on the robbery, bro? Like, come on. And then he ends up calling 911 and telling the dispatch that the employee that he fired had something to do with it, and then she ends up popping his balloon too. So she takes the gun, grabs her check, and takes the robber's car to the bank to cash her check. Inside the bank, tensions erupt. The science project Arya made is misread as a bomb, and Janiyah finds herself at the center of a standoff that she never intended to provoke. One of the bank tellers secretly live streams Janiyah in the bank telling her side of the story to the negotiating cop, Officer Ramen, played by Teyana Taylor. This causes hundreds of people to rally outside in support of Janiyah right out there in the parking lot of the bank. Then in the film's crazy twist, it's revealed during the crisis that Arya actually died from a seizure the night before, and Janiyah had refused to face the reality of her daughter's death and went on about her day as if her daughter was still alive. Many of the moments throughout that day were not accurate in her mind, and we as the viewers were seeing everything as Janiyah saw it in her delusion. The final images of Janaya's surrender left me really questioning what was real and what was imagined. I mean, I even started thinking that the crowd could have been a hallucination, being that when she came outside, you couldn't see the crowd or hear them, but you could hear the cops and everything else. Then when Janaya looks out to the crowd, they reappear and you could hear them again. So I don't know what was real and what wasn't. This was all probably part of this woman's psychosis. I'm gonna keep it a beanbag with you. Those protesters must have gone to the Dollar General and got busy making them signs because they were out there with quickness. I'm surprised T.I. wasn't out there. And I don't know how, but that grocery store was selling great value products. Hands down, Richard was the funniest character in the movie. His facial expressions and lines had me rolling. What a classic performance. And now that we're on to the esoteric portion of the video, I'll start by saying that Richard actually is who reveals a deep hidden message in the film. When the manager's office is getting robbed, Richard puts in the safe combination 92255. Little dope tidbit. September 22nd, 1955 is the trial date for Bryant and Millam for the taking and deletion of Emmett Till. The very next day, they were acquitted after an all-white jury deliberated for 67 minutes. The verdict fueled outrage throughout the South and was the catalyst for the civil rights movement. Aria's death the night before started the chain of events that sparked the protest at the bank. I thought that was an interesting hidden Easter egg that aligns perfectly with another date found in plain sight. Janaya's license plate bears the numbers 21541, and February 15, 1941 is the date of Executive Order 8802, signed by Franklin D. Roosevelt, prohibiting government contractors from engaging in employment discrimination based on race or national origin. It was the first federal action to promote equal opportunity and prohibit discrimination. And I thought those little slick placements was kind of dope from Tyler Perry. Now, I said that I would talk about the ramen on the table and Aria's zoo picture, and this part was a heavy dose of esoteric revelation indeed. Let me back it up and give a little context real quick. After the Civil War, Chinese laborers who had been brought to the South to replace emancipated Black people in the field discovered that running tiny grocery stores in segregated towns was more reliable than picking cotton. In other words, Chinese people used to pick cotton too, but then they had the opportunity to start these stores when they were given money by banks so that they could set up shop in Black neighborhoods and serve the white people as well. By the early 1900s, virtually every hood between Memphis and Vicksburg had a Chinese store whose main clientele was Black. Now, Chinese people didn't invent ramen, but these family grocery stores did lay the template for later immigrant storefronts that would spring up in the northern and midwestern inner cities during white flight. A century later, foreign-owned stores still remain disproportionately common in low-income Black neighborhoods. And that pattern is structural because low property values and restrictions on bank lending make these districts the sweetest points of entry for middleman minorities to extract flow from the so-called Black neighborhoods. Now, that racialized retail geography was produced by zoning, redlining, and decades of tough-on-crime policies. Now, into those storefront networks flowed instant ramen, which is a Japanese invention now worth $1.2 billion a year in North America. Those noodles leave U.S. factories in California, Georgia, and Virginia, pass through a national wholesaler such as E.B. Brown or regional Asian-owned distributors, and land by the caseloads in bodegas and stores where a 35% margarine on 25-cent bricks helps keeps the lights on when the cigarettes and the lotto sales dip. And those foreign storefront owners sit at the final cash register end of that instant noodle pipeline. Instant ramen slid into Black kitchens through the back door of America's food desert economy. That's when the big supermarket chains abandoned the inner city neighborhoods and immigrant-run stores and bodegas filled the shelves with products that were cheap, calorie-dense, and didn't need to be refrigerated. A shrink-wrap brick of 5 or 6 noodle packs only costs a couple of dollars and could be cooked with nothing more than boiled tap water. You could even remix that thing with a couple packets of hot sauce and a couple slices of cheese or whatever. Now, this scarcity-driven menu is a direct product of redlining and underinvesting in Black areas where residents rely on corner stores stocked with processed foods because fresh options are miles away. And not only that, the people have lost their knowledge of eating from the land. Now, behind the bars, that same noodle becomes even more lucrative. Private commissary giants like Keith Group, Trinity Services Group, and Aramac signed exclusive contracts with the Department of Corrections, and then they mark up the ramen another 50 to 150%. Some prisoners are paying like $1.60 for the same pack of noodles. And then after the state budgets slash prison meal portions, ramen eclipsed cigarettes as the unofficial currency behind the wall. Tattoos, drugs, gambling, even artistic services fall under the currency exchange for that curly sodium soup. And because the so-called Black American is incarcerated at 5 times higher than the so-called white American, the noodles for dollar exchange inscribed itself into the culture, the slang, and the everyday life, and it even echoes back to the hip-hop culture as a memoir of poverty, survival, and triumph, showing us that ramen at the beginning after Arya's picture of the zoo didn't spark this connection in my head at first until we see Janiyah walking through the door at work and her friend was at the cash register and she can be seen bagging up some ramen. And it would seem kind of arbitrary if they didn't make it a point to show her bagging the ramen again after she'd already bagged it. But the part of this scene that really ties it all together is Richard's first clear words on camera that he says to Janiyah. He says, "It's always a zoo out there at the first of the month."
There's always a damn zoo up there the first of the month.
To me, that connects the zoo picture and the ramen on the table to the scene where Richard mentions the jungle and the lady bagging the ramen in that same scene. And to me, those animals actually look like they're in jail. Now, you know I cannot leave this video without commenting on the social commentary that surrounds this movie. Tyler Perry's Straw has triggered a familiar chorus of think pieces accusing the director of profiting off of Black women's pain. Some say he has an obsession with seeing Black women struggle, but they have little criticism for the Black women who agreed to play in these roles. And as far as I'm concerned, he was equal opportunity when it came to making unsavory characters in this movie. The 2 men that ran out of the bank and left the women, Detective Raymond's partner who thought Janiyah was just a cold-blooded killer. Don't forget the guy that broke the glass at Shorty's feet. You had the robbers. You had her ridiculous boss, Richard. You had that crooked cop. You had the crooked FBI. Y'all talking about the way he portrayed women when every man in the movie was trash except for Sinbad's character, Benny. Some people say he exploits trauma and frames the film as yet another entry in his catalog of misery. Some ding the movie for melodrama and implausible twists, implying that the spectacle and not the substance is the driving force of his narrative. But what about the roster of nurturing, competent Black women that Perry threaded into this Straw movie? A firm yet compassionate Black woman bank manager who tries to de-escalate Janiyah's crisis. Remember, she knew the entire time. The grocery store worker who slips her a couple extra dollars to show that sisterhood survival vibe. You had Detective Raymond, a seasoned officer who speaks to Janiyah like a sister and not a perp. Then you even have Janiyah's overlooked line, "You have to be careful who you have children with."
You gotta be so careful who you have a baby with.
And it doesn't come off as an indictment of Black motherhood. It's a caution about shared responsibility and structural forces, absent partners, predatory lending, and underfunded hospitals that shape the family outcome. Her refusal to abort her baby when pressured by the hospital staff signifies body autonomy and the faith in her child's worth. Even her breakdown is layered. I felt like Tyler Perry left breadcrumbs linking her deteriorating mental state to the food insecurity, isolation, the guilt of past parenting choices, and it leads you to think about the root cause of her breakdown rather than dismiss her as a one-note victim. Focusing all the criticism on Tyler Perry is crazy when there aren't many positive roles for Black women in Hollywood as it stands. And it also disguises a larger industry failure. Condemning the film without acknowledging its positive archetypes simplifies the conversation and just makes it about a single director's filmography, when the truth is that there's a grand scheme at play and Tyler Perry is just one part of it. And yes, I do personally think he is a part of a scheme, but he always sneaks the truth in there somehow. And maybe Tyler Perry named it Straw not due to it being the last straw, but it being a foresight of this straw man misrepresentation argument being made about the film. First, you have to distort or oversimplify Perry's actual position. Then you attack that weakened straw version instead of his real message. And then you can claim victory over the straw version while the original stance remains unaddressed. I don't know. He could be talking about Jania's straw man name in all caps, her income termination, her bank account termination, and all the debt slave nuances throughout the film. But that's another topic for another video. So there you have it, a full breakdown and recap of the film, a bit of history, some theories to get the conversation going, and you know you could let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you like this video, go ahead and do all that dope YouTube stuff for me and tap that screen a few times. And if you're not subbed, hopefully this will be the video to make you do it. That's all for my video this evening. I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.